Hey guys, I'm Justin with Legato Financial Group. Our firm is passionate about helping educate consumers, which is why we're powering the Gaining Interest podcast. The podcast of quick conversations with industry experts on topics that you want to know about, from sports to dining to healthcare and automotive, and really everything in between. It's hosted by one of the greatest local personalities that I've met, that's John Ramsey.
I'll tell you why I love this podcast, because it's all about community. We used to call it water cooler talk, and that no longer exists. But if it's interesting to you, it's interesting to us. We encourage you to tell your friends. As Justin mentioned, we're going to talk about everything under the sun. We will be gaining interest, and we appreciate you watching. Hello again, everyone, and welcome to Gaining Interest. Yes, we talk about everything that is interesting, and if you happen to be a parent, then this will be of particular interest to you. You make a lot of choices that affect your child's lives, but none are more important than the educational path you decide on for him or her, and specifically college choices. So today we are talking to Mr. Sam Case, and Sam is the founder and director of College Prep. So I always like to defer to the experts, and he is an expert. First of all, Sam, thanks for your time.
Great to be here. Thank you for having me.
I am so glad that you are here, because this is a big one. You know, first of all, I think it's interesting. I feel your energy, and you could have obviously done anything you want. I see you come in the room and I go, okay, he has presence, he has this. What led you to this calling? Well, tell me a little bit about you.
That's a great question. I'll tell you, I started off as a psychologist and was in that traditional practice for about 4 or 5 years. And then UCLA, that great school over on the West Coast, you probably have heard about U.S. News and World Report. They do a lot of the rankings for the universities, and they're always changing their criteria. So about 15 years ago, they started looking at something called retention rate when they ranked universities. And what that is they're looking at how well you recruit that freshman class, and can you keep them all 4 years? So those schools decided, we don't really know what we're doing in terms of, do we know our students well enough to know if they're going to fit into the university? So they hired a bunch of psychologists to come into the admissions and evaluate the process. When I went there, I just thought, wow, this is very interesting. And it's something that I think families need to know about the behind the scenes storyline. So it evolved from working at UCLA, helping them understand their retention process, and then it evolved to a private practice.
You said one key word there that really resonates with me, and that's fit. A lot of it is about the right fit. Before we get into that, and I do want to delve into that, tell me a little bit about the services you offer, because you and I had a brief conversation where we were talking about college prep and choosing the right college. There's a lot of layers here. So what do you cover?
You're right. I'll say that this process of getting into universities now has gotten, as you probably know, more and more competitive every single year. It doesn't get easier. It gets more competitive. So my process is really working with the families and the student themselves. As a psychologist, I look at best fit. So everything from developing the student's interests, I'll use some interest inventories with the families. So we use strong interest, MBTI, those are personality inventories. And it helps the student, sometimes they know kind of what they want to do, but they don't have words for it. So we'll use those inventories to help them better understand themselves. And then from there, we start looking at schools that do things really well in terms of what they want to do. And then from there, we look at what do you have to get into those schools, and what is your competition looking like. So I would say it's a 4-year plan. If you really are looking at, I would say, top 30 schools, and top 30 is referring to schools where the admit rates are pretty competitive. We've got about 30. About 15 years ago, everybody talked about the Ivy Leagues, right?
Sure.
And then we talked about Ivy +2, which would be MIT, Stanford. Most people think Stanford is an Ivy, but it's really not. But it's got that level of prestige.
Sure, it does.
And then we evolved in the Ivy +4. Now we're at top 30. So all 30 of these schools have that same level of competition that the Ivy Leagues do. So what I do is everything from helping the student understand themselves, helping them match themselves to the right fit schools, and then eventually developing an application profile that's going to get them the highest probability of getting into those target schools. The other thing that I do as part of my practice is we work on, which is a big deal for families, merit-based scholarships. We cannot do a lot with need-based. That's already written based on the parent's income. But merit-based scholarships, they look at lots of factors in there. So we bring that in as well to help these guys be able to afford these schools.
You know, just listening to you, it's easy to gather the fact that you keep up with trends and things that are happening.
Oh,
And I
for
think that's
sure.
critical.
That's
You mentioned the
important.
schools and now the how it's expanded as far as the ones that are considered prestigious and desirable to enter. So, with that being said, how do you keep up with that, and how important is that? I mean, things have evolved a
Yeah.
lot, haven't they?
They evolve and they change. And I would say I say every 4 years, and that's about the cycle. When you look at 4 years, you can see the trends and the changes. There's different types of universities. As we know, there's the Ivy League, there's something called the liberal arts schools, then you have the research institutions. So you can't really rank one school. You have to look at them based on their criteria. And within that criteria, there's been lots of movement, lots of changes. We now even have something called a public Ivy, the Ivy Leagues. And most people don't know this, but we actually have one right here in our area. It's Miami of Ohio.
Wow.
So we've got a public Ivy just down the street.
Well, I knew that was a valuable degree from Miami of Ohio, but that's interesting. So I'm going to give you a scenario, Sam, because I think
Okay.
you probably see this quite often.
Sure.
And tell me how you work this out. Okay, the student is very passionate about a specific endeavor,
Yeah.
and they want to go to a school that will help them pursue that.
Right.
The parent is going, okay, I want something a little bit more safe. Something
Yeah.
that maybe you're not so passionate about, but kind of a fallback position. So you have that dilemma, okay, student here, parent here.
Absolutely.
They both love each other. They want to come together.
Right.
But you're the guy to help make that happen.
That's
So
right.
how do you navigate that?
It's amazing that you say that, because I would say that's probably one of the biggest things that I do with families is, and many families will tell me that they just need that middleman to come in there and help them communicate with each other. And what I reassure families is that, for especially parents, is oftentimes when you have a student or a child that's pulling back, it's not because they don't want to listen to you. I always use that analogy of Charlie Brown. Remember when the kids are sitting in the classroom and you hear the teacher wah, wah, wah?
Walk, walk, walk. Yeah,
Yes.
that's-
What they've got is they've got the parent filter. And the big thing I would say is students don't want to let their parents down, or kids don't want to let their parents down. So sometimes when they're not sure about what they want or where they want to go, they'll just close down. And it's not because they don't want, they need to explore and discover. So I convince the parents, or I let them understand that it's important that those students get time to really kind of explore and discover. And that's where those interest inventories come into place. And then the same thing, educating the parent as much as you educate the student. So just spending time with both. And my process is I believe it's important that you're collaborative. So if you just respect where the parents are coming from, and then you respect where the student is coming from, and then you help them kind of speak each other's languages, I think it works its way out.
I love that, because it's not that one person is right,
Right.
completely. Let's meet somewhere and discuss it. I like that. Work
Yeah.
it out.
Work it out.
Okay, I saw something on television, Sam, and I hope you saw the same, but if not, I'm sure you have an opinion. This gentleman was very interesting. He was an author. No need to know his name, but it was interesting. He said, do not pursue your passion, pursue your talent. And his philosophy was this. He was saying that, look, you can pursue a passion, he goes, but if it happens to be music or the arts or something, he goes, the likelihood of being successful is very small, very slim.
Yeah.
He said, on the other hand, if you're talented at something, he goes, you may not think this is your passion, he goes, but if you do it enough and you become a master of that talent, he goes, then you will make really good money. And he says, and you'll learn to love it, because you've done it so much repetitively, you've become a master, and you'll take pride in that. And I've seen that play out for some people. What are your thoughts? I mean, I know this is probably very elementary in the process.
Not
for you.
at all. I think it's important. I
Okay,
think
so
that's a
which
critical
way do you
question.
try to get a student to lean, or does it depend on the scenario?
You got it. It depends on the scenario. What I would say is there are times where students are driven by what they know, maybe for their parents, if their parents are doctors or their parents are lawyers. So it's a very clear storyline for them. And then other times they're repelled by what they know. They're just like, no way, I don't want to do this. And then that's why I always say that 4-year plan is the best, because you get time to really work through this with the student. But then when you get them to understand more about who they are and what they want, then those conversations come up. And then there's multiple ways to approach it. So say, for example, if you a student who's driven by the things that they love, then you have to evaluate how do you see yourself in 5, 10, 15 years post-graduation? Do you want a house? Do you want vacation? Do you want a car? Well, is that career that you are passionate about going to get you those things? Or are you comfortable renting a great apartment and living a normal life and following that passion? So you have to get them to think about things long term. And then oftentimes that's what gets us to that idea about, do you follow that passion or do you follow that what's the word that you
Talent
use?
is
That
what I use,
talent.
but yeah. Something you have a propensity to be good at.
Got it.
You may
That's
not love
right.
it, but you're good at it.
That's right.
And maybe that's in your DNA. You kind of touched
right.
upon that, which is interesting to me.
Yeah.
Okay, so I want to know how the sauce is made. So here's what we're going to talk about here: is strategies, resources to help kids get in the college they want, help the parents get their children accepted at colleges they choose. So
Sure.
Are there strategies?
There definitely is, for sure.
That's why they need to see it. College
That's right.
prep.
They got to come hang out with us, and we'll talk about more detail about it.
There you go.
But I will say what we do in my office is we will use something called an academic vita. And what it does is it breaks down, there's 5 things that all admissions officers at any school, whether it's an Ivy League, a public Ivy, a liberal arts school, they're going to be evaluating you with all of your competition. So there's an academic section, which everyone knows about, which is the common stuff. It's going to be your transcript. There's 2 things on that transcript. It's rigor. When you look at the high school that you're attending, are you going after the more rigorous courses? And performance, what is your GPA? Most people understand GPA, but they don't understand the difference between AP, IB, all those types of courses. Right. So rigor and performance on a transcript. Then they're going to evolve and talk about testing. There's been a lot of chatter about that, especially around COVID, when a lot of our ACT, SATs became optional. They're now moving away from that. Little by little, they're coming back to requiring testing. I'd say about maybe 40% of schools have already brought it back in, and it's starting to show up again. So that's the academic section. Then there's the extracurricular and leadership section of your story. Then there's going to be philanthropy. How do you get involved in your community? They care about that. And if you're an athlete, that's probably the one that's a bit more optional. If you're an athlete, how that's going to play into your application. And then finally, all schools now, they want to know what you're doing all 12 months. So we have a section in our academic beta that talks about summer, making sure you have an intentional, meaningful summer, because oftentimes that's what's going to get you that hook or make you stand out. So we start off with the academic vita, and then we just explain all 5 of those categories, and then naturally students will start to gravitate toward things that excite them. And then if you're authentic and you're real, and then you can show results and outcome, you're going to be successful.
This, to me, is eye-opening. So for any parent that is watching, gaining interest, by the way, powered by Legato Financial Group, we love them for that, because this is interesting and it's good information. So what you just said talks more about what we discussed before, which is the involvement and the way things have changed. Is now there's emphasis on extracurricular activities, maybe even more than ever. What you did during the summer, goodness sakes.
12 months now.
So I needed to give up the lifeguard job.
Can't
is that
hide
what you're
nothing.
saying?
Yeah.
Do something meaningful. And I think there is an emphasis too, correct me if I'm wrong, Sam, but on giving back to the community and knowing that if you're present in any town, whether it be in Miami of Ohio, Stanford, or wherever, if you're up north at one of the Ivy League schools, doing something to make a difference there, correct?
That's right. Yeah, oftentimes you'll hear there's this big idea about, if you can go off to Africa and you can build a water system, or you can go to Latin America and you can help create an orphanage. The big thing that they're going to be asking at these universities is, how do you take care of your community? So you can do simple things in your own local community. And the number one reason why they're doing that is because you're going to become a part of their community. And they want you to recognize the power that's there at that university and make that place better. So oftentimes if you push too far out, and it's not saying that you cannot, if there's an intentional reason for that and it makes sense, do it, but don't do it to impress a university. If you've got a need in your own local community and you recognize it and you address it, that says a lot more than just going over to Africa or down to Latin America.
I would imagine that your company, College Prep, has a lot of partners. If you're not an expert in the field, it sounds like you're an expert on quite a bit of it, the majority of it, but then you have people that, hey, I can get you in touch with. For instance, we touched upon, or you touched upon, ACT, SAT scoring, and they're kind of coming back to that a little bit.
That's right.
Testing.
It's coming back into the climate.
Interesting, which is interesting to me. So let's say a student needs help or wants to raise their score, and maybe that's their weakness. What would you recommend they do?
Yeah, what I try and do is that's again, I'm going to go back to that 4-year plan. The better you know the student, the better you know the family, the better this process is. But when we get to that stage, and it's usually about second semester of sophomore year, they have enough curriculum under their belts to where they can start exploring and looking at SAT, ACT. We give them lots of resources to work on their own with that, and we support that in the office. But there's a point to where if we've got a target number, because we've got those best fit schools, and they're just not reaching that number, we know at that point they probably need some expert help. We've got great teams around Louisville, and one of the great things about, I would say, COVID that really worked for us is a lot of things you can do now virtual. So we've got a lot of referrals that we work with for test prep.
So for folks out there now, perhaps they have a high school freshman or sophomore. When should they call college prep? It sounds to me, because it's getting more competitive, but I would think the earlier the better.
It's a 4-year plan.
I would think, yes.
I think
you
you're
said
right.
the 4-year plan,
It's
right?
a 4-year plan. I would say definitely, depending on what the student's goals are, and if you don't know your goals, just come on in. Our consults are free, so we can help you decide when that onboarding process should be. But typically, if you're going after in those more competitive schools where the admit rates drop into the 20, 30% or below 10%, definitely, it's typically a 4-year plan. So the earlier you come in, the better. But if you're thinking about, if you're looking at local things or you want scholarships, it's another argument for coming in early, because the more prepared you are, then you can create that action plan.
I think the need for college prep is and we keep going back to competitive. So if you're competitive, why not talk to an expert and say, okay, what do I need? What am I missing? Or what are my strengths and what can I actually showcase in my application? That sounds important to me. So you mentioned, okay, get ahead of it. I like that. Is recommendation letters, is that still a thing?
It is, yeah. When we talk about senior year, there's things you will do as a freshman that'll prepare you for that sophomore year, and things you do as a sophomore that get you ready for that junior year. And if you missed any of those, oftentimes you're kind of running to catch up for those things. But right around that summer going into senior year, with all of our students, we go through a very detailed process about who your recommenders should be. And we talk about academic recommenders, outside recommenders, and then we talk about how you go about getting the best possible letter. And there's a process behind that. It's a networking thing, right?
Right.
So you're teaching these little guys how to network and how to like build relationships, but at the same time, they're going to get these very powerful letters. I would say definitely the essays become a big deal, and you may have heard about that in the application. That essay, your intentional recommendations, who you choose to talk about you, and what you want them to say about you. You just want to be very intentional, and you kind of want to create these stories, and you want to pick the people that can really reinforce those stories. That's important.
I think you've done a really good job at educating and making people realize there's a lot here, and college prep is the place to go. With that being said, what is that first consultation like? What should someone bring? What should the student, the parent bring in, and what can they expect?
Yeah, that's a great question. We do about a 1-hour consult in the office. If you're here in Louisville, preference is you come into the office, and we're actually just downstairs. So we're right here on the ground level of this building. But basically, depending on what year they are, if they're coming in, basically a transcript, so whatever they've got under that high school transcript, if they've been exposed to any kind of ACT, SAT, they'll bring that in with them. And then we'll just have a chat. We'll just talk about what they've been doing, what they want to do. But a few data points will help us give them a little bit of guidance. And then I would say it's about fit. There's often times where we're like, you've got this, you're just fine. You just go do A, B, and C, and you're done. And there's other times where you're like, you would probably benefit from having a coach by your side. And then, that's how we do it.
So I have to... You've got your fingers on the pulse, so if you don't mind, I'm going to go reality TV a little bit here. Help me out.
We can do it.
So what were your thoughts when we see these actresses, famous people, athletes.
I know what you're going to say.
Yeah, yes, for lack of a better term, cheating
Sure.
to help their child. There's a part of me, Sam, that kind of gets it. I want to help my kid. On the other hand, I don't want to take away an opportunity from another child
Yeah.
because I cheated. So
Yeah.
obviously you help them do it the right way with strategies that can be advantageous that are actually legal. But
That's right.
your thoughts on that, what you see, what were your thoughts on that? It's probably not that unusual.
Not at all. It's very interesting because I'll tell you, home base for me is California. So, and we have these associations that we're all a part of, and you should make sure any private coach that you work with, they should be a part of the professional associations that are related to college admissions. And there's the national one called NACAC. And so I was a part of that over in California before I moved here to Kentucky. And then I actually knew Rick Singer. He was part of our association.
Whoa.
And there was, yeah.
Oh, you're good.
There were some stories about him already circulating around where he was doing some unique things. But
Unique is a good way to put it.
Yeah. Very creative things.
Okay.
There you go. But so he had a little bit of a history already. So this did not come as a surprise. And I think anyone who's in this field understands that there is that room for people to kind of stretch just go a little beyond what is appropriate. But yeah, I think it's tempting, right? Because everybody wants the best for their kids.
Right.
But I would just say that if you take a little time to prepare yourself, that you'll find that right fit. But it's a little it can be a little tempting.
How do you put
easy?
I bet. Oh, and I can understand both sides of the equation. On the other hand, I want to do it the right way, and that's why college prep is important. So, I'm curious about it. Do you ever have a student or a parent who maybe has these grandiose ideals about where their kid will go, and you're looking and you're going, they're not qualified? I mean, how do you deliver that message? It's like, okay, they're not that, they're more this.
Yeah, that's one of the biggest things that happens probably most often.
But you have to be honest.
You have to be honest, 100%, because you need to be able to make sure that you can deliver and take these families and these kids where they want to be. So I think that happens very often. So what we do is right away there's a process, and I use a 4-tiered process for making recommendations for fits and matches. So we talk about likely schools, and then what we say is your data points need to be in the top 10% of the data points of these kids that are getting into these likely schools. Typically, they're going to be a little bit lower on the threshold. Then you go into possible schools, same thing. Your data points have to maintain top 10% of kids that get into these schools. And then you go to reach. Those schools, they start dropping into that 30% admit rate, so your data points have to jump up a little more. Okay. And now we create a 4th tier because it has gotten crazy competitive called Super Reach. So we're very honest about numbers, and we say, here is the criteria. We know it's holistic, but the reality is you have to cross through certain doors before it becomes holistic. That's one thing that colleges won't share with students and families. They'll tell them because it's a business model for them, right? The more applications they get in, the lower their admit rate is and the better they're ranked. So what I help them understand is that when those colleges are reviewing your app, it becomes holistic at a certain point. You have to have certain criteria before it becomes holistic. So we just talk about the whole pathway and how that works.
Wow. I would think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but because of your resources, because things like merit scholarships, you can actually have this pay for itself, this expertise pay for itself, because there's a lot of people who don't realize there's money out there to get. There's ways I can get you in this that are perfectly fine that you may not be aware of, that kind of thing.
110%. I would say that 90% of our families, those kids are very hardworking kids. So we talk about building in merit-based scholarship coaching and as part of the process. And you're 100% right. I always say to the families, number one, I do what I do because I love it. But at the same time, I love the fact that, there is a fee to work and get this coaching. But at the end of the day, if you deliver on all the things that we ask you to deliver on as a student, 99% of the time, merit-based scholarships come in, and your fees that you paid me are going to get covered by those merit-based scholarships.
That's nice. So you get the expertise, you get perhaps the college of your dreams, it's taken care of.
That's right.
Nice. So if you don't mind, tell me maybe one or two success stories that maybe a family was lost.
Sure.
Maybe they had a gifted child and didn't realize it, or perhaps they just didn't realize that there was
Yeah.
dollars out there available for them,
Yeah.
and you help them in that regard, whichever way.
Yeah, for sure. I think many, because what I'll share with you is the way my program is designed is we have all 4 years. We work with students as freshmen, sophomore, juniors, and seniors, but we'll cap the group or that year at 20 because it is a small by design practice. So I never want to have more than 20 kids in a class. So typically we get those freshmen because of brothers and sisters and referrals. There'll be about 8 or 9 that year, and then they'll just move up to that sophomore year, about 12, 13, 14, and then by the time they become juniors, we're pretty much full. So by that time, we know each other very well. We have a lot of time to get to know each other. I know their strengths. I know what they want to get accomplished. And then from there, we work on the merit-based scholarships. And there's been some great stories of success with that. I remember this one young lady, she loved to write. And she wrote. So I said, there's these programs where this called Scholastics of Scholars, where you can submit these scholarships, these essays, and you can win scholarship money. So we started submitting. She started getting all of this scholarship money before she even applied to her school. She got recognized by one of these programs, and they sent her over to, I think it was Denmark, and she competed in a scholarship in Denmark. Then as a result of that, she got a full ride scholarship to any university that she wanted to attend. Not to mention, talk about a spike and getting her, she was a creative writer, getting her into the college of her dreams, that just made her stand out. Then you have these national scholarships like the Coca-Cola Foundation. That's a scholarship that comes out of Coca-Cola in Atlanta. It's a leadership-based scholarship. So if you know about it, all of a sudden you just start designing your plan around. If you love leadership, you want to be authentic and real. So we find the scholarships that speak to who you are as a kid, and then we just give you those opportunities to grow those.
How rewarding is that for you when a student or someone who attended your classes comes in and has this acceptance letter or has these monies that are awarded them?
Yeah.
You know, hey, I helped you get that. Has to feel good. You're helping achieve dreams. You're changing lives, literally.
Amazing.
You really are.
It's really, that's the rewarding part of the job. And I'll share with you another quick fun story.
Please, no, I love these stories.
There's a great, as we know, Vanderbilt it's our Ivy League of the South.
It's the Harvard of the South.
It's the Harvard of the South, exactly right. What you may not know, and these parents may not know, that this year Vanderbilt's admit rate, 3.5%. 3.5%. Lower than over half of the Ivy Leagues.
What do you attribute that to? Lower than the Ivy Leagues? That's extreme. So what is that?
Extreme. Yeah, I think there's a
Pool
lot
of people they're
things.
pulling from, or
Yeah, number one, I think there's a lot of, you probably have heard about the energy up in the Northeast right now with the Ivy Leagues and what's been happening with a lot of these protests.
Okay, that makes
sense. A lot
sense.
of families are just uncomfortable and they're looking for a more calm, secure place for their students. So obviously, Vandy's always had a phenomenal reputation. But at the same time, Vandy has these 3 scholarships that you can apply to if you do it early. So I have a young fella here that went to one of our great schools in Louisville. He applied to Vanderbilt, got the offer, and then didn't even recognize when he was reading his letter. He's like, yeah, man, he's celebrating with mom and dad. It's a phenomenal thing, 3.5%. He was one of those guys. Just threw this letter, went out, partied with his friends. Then he comes back home, and his dad pulls that letter up, and he reads the next paragraph. Full ride scholarship.
whoa.
Yeah. So he was able, it's 1% of the 3%. And I think that's one of those examples of he came in here as a freshman. He knew what he wanted. We found things that would let those things that he was good at shine. And then not only did he get that offer at Vanderbilt, but they also gave him a full ride.
Wow. Sam, I see you light up when you talk about that because that's really what you're all about.
Yeah.
That's your mission. That's your
Helping
motivation.
those kids find those dreams.
Oh, yeah. You're making dreams happen and changing lives, literally, as I said. And I think that's not exaggerating at all. So.
No.
How I would imagine a lot of your business is referrals.
It is.
So how does someone get started? I mean, now's the time, like you said, it's never too early. The 4-year process. So let's talk about someone who may be watching and saying, okay, how do we start this? What do I need? Do they go to your website, more information? Do they just call you?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I would say probably the easiest way, we have a website. It's cprepgroup.com. And in there's a form at the back of the page, an information form. You can fill that out. Also, there's a phone number in there. You can just call us, and then we can set up that 1-hour consult.
Sam,
Simple.
They wouldn't even let me look at Vanderbilt's campus.
Nah.
I was so unqualified.
I don't believe that.
But you could help me, couldn't you?
I don't believe that. I can get you in there. You don't have a problem.
I love that. Okay.
But before I leave, I got to talk, because
Sure.
oftentimes people think, oh, you only want to work with college prep if you want to go to an Ivy League or a really competitive school or you're a top performing student. Not accurate.
Okay, good.
If you want to go, say, for example, a lot of families don't know this because many families in Kentucky, I've learned, have generational relationships with like UK, our flagship school, UK, Center, U of L. But what we found is that just like all of these Ivy Leagues and top 30 schools,
More competitive.
Our scholarship program now to get into UK, if you don't have a 32,
Whoa.
yeah, so there's a lot of things you've got to know. It's not just, our state schools. There's a lot of things that have changed here as well. So I think just getting informed and figuring out what the climate is like out there. It's not just, we shouldn't just be talking about the Ivies and Vandy. It's what's going on right here in our own back door here in Kentucky.
Obviously, during this process, you're going to get to know the student better.
For sure.
And they're going to get to know the process of applying to a college.
Yes.
But that student, and that parent probably too, will get to know that student better. That student will understand what their passions are, so they don't make bad decisions, which can be horrific.
That's right.
And a long road.
Yeah.
So talk a little bit about that.
I think that's a very important question. What we do as part of that really in-depth work with my students is that idea that you can get into a great school, but if you don't know yourself well enough, or you don't know that school that you've applied to, you applied to it because your mom and dad went there, or your best friend told you it was a great school and you just like the name, and you apply and you go and you get there and you realize this is really not me. What's going to happen is you're going to lose a lot of money. Tuition now. Do you know tuition right now?
Oh,
$90,000 is a very typical tuition rate at a private school. Many of our public schools are about $20,000 to $40,000.
Whoa.
And if you don't happen to live in that state where the public school is, it could be $50,000 to $60,000. So it's a lot of investment for 1 year. Oftentimes what happens is if a student doesn't know themselves well enough or doesn't know the school they've committed to, they get there and they're not happy. They've invested a whole year, anywhere from $20,000 to $90,000, and then they have to transfer. They're going to lose their credits. They're going to an additional year to study at a new school. Plus, mom and dad are going to lose out on a lot of money.
Yeah.
So one of the big things that we do is we spend time to help the student understand who they are, so that we can lower that likelihood that when they get to this school that they're going to find out that they're not a good fit. We want them to know that this is a good fit, and their success rate is going to be very high. They get out of there in 4 years, and they're not worried about trying to make up $90,000 from mom and dad because they made a bad decision.
and ultimately they're happier.
And they're happier, absolutely.
Sam, thank you.
Thank you, young fella.
Again, you young fella, I like this. These people skills too. College prep, okay, we'll put the information up on the screen.
Absolutely.
And as you can tell, there's a lot of information here, but it is truly life-changing. If you're a parent or a student, check it out. And we once again want to thank the Legato Financial Group for funding this, because this show is all about, we call it Gaining Interest, about things that are interesting. And I don't know about you, but as a parent, very interesting. Sam, thanks again.
Thank you, young fella.
All right, young fella. Gosh, I love it.
Telling you.
Love this guy. I'll have you on again. Just keep saying
Do it. Let's do it.
All right. Once again, thanks for joining Gaining Interest, and we'll see you next time.